Finally, racket review, Head Speed Pro Legend, upcoming 2026 Speed Pro. You know, this one is really special. I used to play with the Graphene Speed Pro and IG Speed MP, which was a foundation for the gravity mold. And you know, it seems industry is redefining the meaning of a classic racket. Prestige and Blade. I think those two are the most popular classic rackets, the best classic rackets. Now it seems players are shifting towards more aggressive, more forgiving rackets, and there is a big question mark next to Blade and Prestige rackets. It seems that brands like Wilson and Head are considering killing some of the rackets that are too classic for modern players, upcoming next-gen players. Obviously, it's a game of numbers, so if the sales are not up to the expectations, something has to be changed. So, the definition of a classic racket is shifting. Well, you need a bit more forgiveness, you need a bit more power, a bit more spin potential. So, basically, it comes down to how easy it is to play with a racket. You know, you have to push the margin to the limits and still fall into a category of a classic racket. And for that, you need a lot of control, a lot of feel. And in order to achieve a classic racket, you probably need a bit lower powered response, so less launchy. For that, probably you need 1820 or 1819 string pattern and or thinner beam, which will be more flexible and yeah, flexible feel, flexible response. And here it comes, Head Speed Pro. I think this is Head's take on a modern yet classic racket. It is a thicker beam, so they have solved the stability and power issue for a modern days. Yet 1820 string pattern and a flexible beam basically checks the demands from users that are used to classic rackets, or maybe they just can't play with anything else. So from Head, we have two classic rackets. Speed Pro, which of course is pushing the limits of a classic racket, and Gravity Pro, which maybe is now from the recent releases the most classic racket from Head's catalog. Thin beam, very flexible, a lot of control, not so much power potential. Speed Pro, in my opinion, it is more user-friendly, step above Gravity Pro, step above Radical MP, which in some ways also is a classic racket, classic in a light of nowadays options on the market. And let's discuss what changed with this newest Speed Pro, what could be improved, and is it an update or downgrade? Is it better? Is it worse? Can it help Prestige users find their new home? So let's start with the performance. For me, it is one of the best rackets for flat hitters. Of course, it is 1820, relatively low launch angle, and for me, the performance didn't change that much from the previous Speed Pro. It is still a racket with quite addictive ratio of power, forgiveness, spin. With the previous Speed Pro, I had a small issue with the ratio being sometimes I'm getting more power than spin, so when I accelerate, when I try to be aggressive, I tend to hit a bit out, so it is a bit harder to get spin, yet it is easy to get power. So this ratio could be a bit difficult for some players. I think it is possible to find a good string for the racket to kinda blur the gaps of power to spin ratio, make it basically more control oriented or more spin friendly. And this ratio from previous to this model is very similar, but the performance of the Speed Pro line is just so high, the bar is set so high, despite this little potential for improvement, it is still one of the best rackets on the market. Some people might say Speed Pro could have 18-19 string pattern, which would align a bit better with Djokovic endorsing the racket, and yeah, maybe I agree. Hopefully the racket would be a bit more spin friendly without adding too much power, because we don't need additional power, only additional spin. In stock form, I would say something was missing regarding wave distribution, but it was quite similar to the previous wave distribution, so if you're used to the previous one, this one will be an easy switch. For me, as a more classically developed player, I wanted to add some mass, but at the same time you have to be careful not to make it too heavy. I added a leather grip, and yeah, it was a bit more fluid, but at the same time I think I want to keep it light. Maybe I will go back to stock grip and add like 5 grams somewhere, maybe here, maybe 1 gram just on top, maybe just a thicker gauge of strings to make the frame more heavy, yet with more control, to give myself some space for added acceleration, basically make the ratio of spin potential to power a bit closer to each other. And all my friends that are using Speed Pro actually are using 130 gauges strings, so I think this is quite a clever idea how to kinda improve the performance for tournament, I would say, because from 18-20 string pattern you won't be getting that much spin potential anyway. You have to achieve spin potential from the strokes. Now to the technology, Hy-Bor. In my opinion, it is a great update and the biggest difference between the previous and this Speed Pro Legend. And you know, I think, and I mentioned it already with the Speed MP review, Hy-Bor technology is meeting these classic players, and the feel is more consistent, maybe slightly stiffer if you tend to string your racket a bit higher, but in general I would say I got more control out of it. And same thing I noticed with Prestige line. If you string your Prestige too high, it will become a board. And same with this Speed Pro, you want to keep your tension quite low, otherwise the feel might become a bit boardy. But this means in this racket, this Speed Pro is more control oriented than the previous one. So they are already making this gap of performance between power and spin smaller. So head is going into this direction as well. Speed Pro now is a more complete, balanced racket. Will I switch to Speed Pro? Maybe. Definitely going into my top 5 rackets of choice. So yeah, every racket has some pros and cons. I'm very happy that Head has such a racket in their catalog, and definitely it is a contender for my racket of choice. There are some interesting updates coming from me in the future. Let me prepare it, and yes, see you soon. Make sure to subscribe, and bye bye.